Imagine you are a little boy growing up in South Africa. You are lonely. You are bullied at school. You hide in the library, reading science fiction books. You look up at the moon and you dream. And in that dream, there is one face, one name, Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on another world. To you, he is not just an astronaut. He is a god. He represents everything that is good and brave and possible in humanity. You tell yourself that one day you will be like him. One day you will build rockets too. Now, fast forward 30 years. You have done it. You have risked your entire fortune to build a space company. You are trying to do what everyone said was impossible. You are trying to save the future of human exploration. You expect your heroes to be proud. You expect a pat on the back. But then, you turn on the television, and what you see destroys you. It is the year 2010. The setting is the United States Congress. Sitting at the table, wearing grim suits, are the legends themselves. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan, the last man on the moon. They are there to testify about the future of spaceflight. And they are not there to praise Elon Musk. They are there to stop him. They look into the cameras and tell the government that relying on private companies like SpaceX is a mistake. They call it a slide to mediocrity. They say it is unsafe. They imply that Elon Musk is a reckless amateur who is going to get people killed. Imagine the knife going into Elon's heart. These were the men whose posters were on his wall. These were the men who inspired him to make the money in the first place. And now, they were sitting in the halls of power, using their legendary status to strangle his dream in the crib. It was the ultimate betrayal. It wasn't business. It was personal. There is a famous interview from that time. The journalist, Scott Pelley from 60 Minutes, is sitting with Elon. He asks him about this moment. He asks, "Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan testified against what you are doing. These are your heroes. How does that make you feel?" Most CEOs would have given a polished answer. They would have said, "I respect their opinion, but I disagree." Not Elon. In that moment, the billionaire armor fell off. The Iron Man mask cracked. Elon looked away. He paused for a long, painful silence. His eyes filled with tears. His voice trembled. He looked like that lonely little boy in the library again. He simply said, "I was very sad to see that. Because those guys are my heroes, so it's really tough." He didn't get angry. He didn't lash out like he did with Bob Iger or Bill Gates. He was heartbroken. He said, "I wish they would come visit and see what we are doing. I think they would change their minds." But they didn't come. They stayed away. And the doubt spread like a virus. Because if Neil Armstrong, the greatest astronaut in history, didn't believe in SpaceX, why should anyone else? Why should NASA give them a contract? Why should employees work 80 hours a week? The message from the old guard was clear. You are not one of us. You are a pretender. Go back to making internet payments. This video is not just about a rocket launch. It is about the hardest fight Elon Musk ever fought. Not against gravity. Not against bankruptcy. But against the ghosts of his own heroes. It is the story of how he took that sadness, that rejection, and turned it into the fuel that would eventually conquer the sky. Because 10 years later, when the world had given up on America sending its own astronauts to space, when the Russians were laughing at NASA, who was the only one standing there with a rocket ready to fly? It wasn't Boeing. It wasn't the old contractors. It was the boy who cried during the interview. And what he did next didn't just prove them wrong. It rewrote history. To understand why the betrayal by Armstrong and Cernan hurt so much, you have to understand the atmosphere of the time. In the early 2000s, the space industry was an exclusive club. It was run by giant government contractors like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. These were companies that had been around for decades. They wore stiff suits. They had billion-dollar lobbying budgets. They built rockets that were incredibly expensive, and they threw them away after one use. To them, space was serious business. It was slow, it was costly, and it was definitely not for internet millionaires with crazy ideas. When Elon Musk showed up, he didn't look like a rocket scientist. He looked like a kid. He talked about colonizing Mars. He talked about landing rockets on ships. He talked about making space travel cheap. To the old guard, this wasn't just ambitious. It was offensive. It was like a child walking into a brain surgery operating room and saying he could do it better with a pocket knife. They called him a hobbyist. They called SpaceX a vanity project. Behind closed doors in Washington, D.C., they laughed at him. They nicknamed him the boy with the toy. They were absolutely certain he would fail, and for a long time it looked like they were right. The early days of SpaceX were not filled with glory. They were filled with disaster. Elon took his team to a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Kwajalein Atoll. It was hot. It was humid. The salt air corroded the metal. The engineers were sleeping in tents, fighting off rats, and working 20 hours a day. It was hell on earth. And the rockets, they kept exploding. Falcon 1, Flight 1. It cleared the tower and then spun out of control. Fire and twisted metal falling into the ocean. Flight 2. It almost made it. Then the engine died. Another failure. Flight 3. This was the heartbreaker. The rocket actually separated, but the first stage bumped into the second stage. Boom. 3 launches. 3 failures. Every time a rocket exploded, the critics in the industry nodded their heads. "See?" they said. "We told you so. Space is hard. You can't do this with a startup mentality." The media piled on. They ran headlines calling it Musk's folly. They tracked his burning cash pile like a countdown clock to his death. But the criticism wasn't just about the explosions. It was about the philosophy. Elon was proposing something that defied the laws of physics as the industry understood them. He wanted to land the rockets. He wanted to reuse them. You have to understand how crazy this sounded. For 50 years, rockets were like bullets. You shoot them, and they are gone. No one had ever landed an orbital-class rocket booster vertically. The experts said the fuel penalty was too high. They said the aerodynamics were impossible. They said the heat would destroy the engines. Neil Armstrong himself, in that painful testimony, suggested that the new players like SpaceX would have a lower safety standard, that they would cut corners. That was the insult that stung the most. Elon wasn't trying to cut corners. He was trying to innovate. But the old guard couldn't tell the difference. They saw innovation as risk, and they saw risk as the enemy. So Elon was fighting a war on 2 fronts. On one front, he was fighting the laws of physics on a tropical island, watching his money burn up in the atmosphere. On the other front, he was fighting a public relations war against the very legends who inspired him. The psychological pressure was immense. Imagine trying to solve the hardest engineering problem in the world while the people who wrote the textbooks are telling Congress that you are dangerous. Most people would have folded. Most people would have said, maybe Neil Armstrong is right. Maybe I should just stick to electric cars. But Elon possesses a trait that his enemies underestimated, a tolerance for pain that borders on masochism. When the 3rd rocket exploded, he didn't go hide. He walked into the control room, looked at his devastated team, and said, "We are going to do this. I don't care if I have to sell everything I own. We are going to make it work." He wasn't fighting for money anymore. He was fighting for vindication. He needed to prove to the world and to himself that his heroes were wrong. He needed to show them that the future didn't belong to the safe, slow, expensive past. It belonged to the crazy ones. But time was running out. By late 2008, SpaceX had money for only one more launch. If Flight 4 failed, the company was dead. The dream was dead, and the critics would have been right forever. The history books would have written Elon Musk off as a footnote, a rich guy who flew too close to the sun and got burned. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the whole world was waiting for him to fall. September 28, 2008. The 4th launch, the Hail Mary. The rocket went up. The stages separated. It reached orbit. In the control room, the screams weren't of terror, but of relief. Elon Musk had done it. He had proved that a private company could reach orbit. NASA, the same agency whose heroes had doubted him, called him days later. They offered a $1.6 billion contract. SpaceX was saved, but saving the company was not enough. Elon didn't just want to be another Boeing launching expensive rockets and throwing them into the ocean. He wanted to change the game. He wanted revenge on the idea that space had to be expensive. He looked at his engineers and said, "Now, we bring it back." You have to understand how insane this sounded in 2011. Imagine taking the Empire State Building, shooting it into the sky at supersonic speeds, flipping it around, and trying to land it gently on a dinner plate floating in the middle of a stormy ocean. The Russian space chiefs laughed. The American competitors rolled their eyes. They said the fuel required to slow down would destroy the payload capacity. They said the legs would melt. They said the guidance software didn't exist. Elon didn't care. He started the grasshopper tests. He blew up rocket after rocket trying to figure out the landing. They crashed into the ocean. They crashed into the drone ships. They tipped over and exploded in glorious fireballs. The media mocked him again. "Look at Musk blowing up his toys," they wrote. But they didn't understand that every explosion was data. Every failure was a lesson. Elon was learning fast. Then came the night of December 21st, 2015. Cape Canaveral, the Falcon 9 lifted off. It delivered its satellites into space. That was the easy part. Then, the booster did something that had never been seen before in human history. It stopped falling. It turned around. It fired its engines against the gravity of Earth. It was pitch black outside. In the control room, hundreds of young engineers were watching the telemetry screens. Their hearts were pounding. On the night vision cameras, a bright light appeared in the sky. It was coming down fast. Too fast, it seemed. A sonic boom shook the ground. The windows rattled. The flame grew larger. The legs deployed. For a second, the smoke obscured everything. The world held its breath. Was it a crater? Was it another fireball? Then, the smoke cleared. Standing there, tall, proud, and perfectly still in the center of the landing pad, was the rocket. The Falcon has landed. The room erupted. People were hugging, crying, jumping on desks. It was the Apollo 11 moment for a new generation. Elon ran out onto the floor. He looked at the screen, stunned. He had done the impossible. He had taken a piece of flying metal the size of a skyscraper and landed it like a feather. At that exact moment, the argument ended. The experts who testified in Congress? Silent. The competitors who said it was impossible? Terrified. The Russians who laughed? They stopped laughing. Elon proved that rockets didn't have to be trash. They could be airplanes. They could be refueled and flown again. He had reduced the cost of access to space by a factor of 10. But more importantly, he had sent a message to every doubter, every cynic, and every hero who turned their back on him. The message was simple. The laws of physics are the only rules that matter. Everything else is just a suggestion. The visual of that rocket landing did more than any spreadsheet could. It looked like science fiction. It looked like the future had finally arrived. And somewhere, you have to wonder if Neil Armstrong, before he passed away, saw the progress. You have to wonder if he realized that the boy he doubted was actually the one carrying his torch. This success didn't just save SpaceX. It destroyed the competition. The United Launch Alliance, the giant monopoly of Boeing and Lockheed, suddenly looked like a dinosaur. Why would anyone pay $400 million for a disposable rocket when Elon could do it for $60 million with a reusable one? The market shifted overnight. SpaceX began to dominate the global launch industry. But the victory was bittersweet. Because while the world applauded, the personal pain of that 2010 testimony still lingered. Elon had proven them wrong, yes. But he never got the apology he deserved. He never got to hear his heroes say, "Good job, kid." Instead, he had to find solace in the mission itself. He had to realize that sometimes you have to kill your idols to become one yourself. The landing was the turning point. It transformed Elon Musk from a crazy billionaire into a visionary engineer in the eyes of the public. It validated the tears. It validated the sleepless nights. It validated the humiliation. And it set the stage for the next impossible dream. If he could land a rocket on Earth, why couldn't he land one on Mars? History has a sense of humor. Sometimes it is a cruel one. 10 years after Neil Armstrong testified that commercial spaceflight was a mistake, the United States of America found itself in a humiliating position. Since the space shuttle retired in 2011, NASA had no way to send its own astronauts to space. For nearly a decade, the greatest superpower on Earth had to buy tickets from Russia. Imagine the embarrassment. American astronauts wearing American flags on their shoulders had to travel to Kazakhstan, climb into a Russian Soyuz capsule, and pay $80 million a seat to their geopolitical rivals. The Russians loved it. They mocked the US. They threatened to cut off access. NASA needed a hero. They needed an American rocket. They had two options: Boeing, the trusted giant, and SpaceX, the wild card. NASA gave billions to Boeing to build the Starliner. They gave a smaller amount to SpaceX to build the Dragon. The old guard was sure Boeing would win. They were the professionals. They had done this for 50 years. But while Boeing struggled with software bugs and delays, Elon's team was moving at light speed. May 30th, 2020. The eyes of the world turned to Florida. Sitting on top of a Falcon 9 rocket was the Crew Dragon capsule. Inside were two brave men, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. They were about to do what the critics said was impossible. They were about to ride a private rocket to the International Space Station. The weather was bad. The tension was high. Elon Musk was not in the control room this time. He was pacing. He later admitted he felt like he was going to pass out. He said, "I felt like my heart was going to stop." This wasn't cargo. This wasn't a satellite. These were fathers, husbands, friends. If this rocket exploded, it wasn't just a failure. It was murder. And Elon knew that the ghosts of the past, the doubts of Armstrong and Cernan, would return to haunt him forever. 3, 2, 1, liftoff. The rocket roared into the gray sky. It pierced the clouds. Millions of people watched online. For 12 minutes, nobody breathed. Then, the call came through the radio. Dragon, separation confirmed. They were in orbit. They were safe. At the post-launch press conference, Elon was asked how he felt. He couldn't speak. He choked up. He rubbed his face, trying to hide the tears. He said, "I've spent 18 years working toward this goal. It's hard to believe that it's happened." Then, he looked at the camera and said something that closed the loop on a decade of pain. "The trampoline is working." It was a direct shot at the Russian space chief who had told NASA to use a trampoline. But it was also a message to the doubters at home. The hobbyist had done it. The boy with the toy had beaten Boeing. He had beaten the entire military-industrial complex. SpaceX had restored America's dignity in space. The irony was complete. The same agency that questioned his safety standards was now entrusting him with their most precious cargo. The same industry that laughed at his reusable rockets was now scrambling to copy them. Even the critics had to admit defeat. Boeing, with all its billions and history, was still grounded. Their Starliner capsule was plagued with errors. Elon Musk, the outsider, was the only one flying. Today, SpaceX is not just a participant in the space industry. It is the space industry. They launch more mass into orbit than every other country and company on Earth combined. They are building the Starship, a beast of a rocket that makes the Saturn V look small. And NASA? NASA is no longer a critic. They are a partner. They are dependent. They have selected Starship to land the next astronauts on the moon. Think about that arc. From being humiliated in Congress by the first moonwalker, to being given the contract to return humanity to the moon. It is the ultimate redemption story. Elon didn't just prove them wrong. He made them need him. But there is a sadness in this victory, too. Gene Cernan died in 2017. Neil Armstrong died in 2012. They never saw the full extent of what Elon built. They never saw the Falcon Heavy land 2 boosters side by side. They never saw the Starship catch. Elon has to live with the fact that his heroes died doubting him. That is a heavy burden, but perhaps it is also a driving force. Perhaps he is still launching rockets bigger and faster and farther, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they can see him from wherever they are. So what is the lesson of this story? It is not about rocket science. It is about the brutal cost of being a visionary. We tell our children to respect their elders. We tell them to follow in the footsteps of their heroes. But Elon Musk's journey teaches us a darker, harder truth. Sometimes, the people you look up to will not understand you. Sometimes, the people who paved the way will try to build a wall in front of you. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can bow down and accept their judgment. You can let their doubts become your reality. Or you can do what Elon did. You can wipe the tears from your eyes, go back to the factory, and build something so undeniable that history has no choice but to remember your name instead of theirs. Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon. He will always be a legend. But Elon Musk is the man who built the bridge to keep us there. He took the torch, even when the hand holding it tried to burn him. Today, there is a new generation of kids growing up. They are in South Africa, in Brazil, in India, in America. They are not looking at posters of Apollo anymore. They are looking at posters of Starship. They are watching the boosters land in unison. They are dreaming of walking on the red sands of Mars. To them, Elon is the hero. He is the legend. And hopefully, when those kids grow up and invent something crazy, something that makes Starship look like a toy, hopefully, Elon remembers how it felt. Hopefully, he will not be the old man in the suit testifying against the future. Hopefully, he will be the one cheering them on. The story of SpaceX is the story of a broken heart that healed itself with fire and titanium. It is proof that while heroes can be wrong, physics never lies. And as long as the laws of physics allow it, Elon will keep pushing. He is no longer looking for approval from the ghosts of the past. He is looking up, to Mars, to the stars, to the survival of consciousness. Now, I want to turn this over to you. This is a difficult question, but I want your honest opinion in the comments. Do you think Neil Armstrong was right to be skeptical, or did he betray the spirit of exploration? Was he protecting NASA, or was he protecting his own legacy? Type Team Armstrong if you think the old guard had a point. Type Team Elon if you think the future belongs to the risk-takers. I will be reading the comments personally and hearting the best arguments. If this story moved you, if you felt the struggle and the triumph, please destroy that like button. It helps us share this truth with the world. And if you are not subscribed yet, you are missing out on the rawest stories on the internet. Click subscribe and ring the bell right now, because in the next video, we are going to tell the prequel to this story. Before Elon could be rejected by NASA, he was humiliated by the Russians. We are going to take you inside a cold, smoke-filled room in Moscow, where a Russian general spit on Elon's shoes and told him to go home. We will reveal how that single act of disrespect created the SpaceX engine that eventually destroyed the Russian space program. It is a story of pure, cold-blooded revenge. You do not want to miss it. This is Musk Untold. See you in the next one.